All right. So, hey everyone, I'm Hugo. I'm your host for today. And so at Dystech, we know how sometimes it's very hard to access, speech pathologists and other professionals. And we also know how those people are very valuable to us and for our children as well. And so that's why we've launched Ask a Speechy. So Ask a Speechy is an initiative where you can submit your question directly on our website. And then every month, we will try to invite a professional on an interview and we will ask them your question. And so today is the first episode, and today we have a very special guest. Today's guest is Cara Didio. So Cara earned her degree through Charles Sturt University. She's a certified speech pathologist. She has over 11 years of experience working in the industry. And so Cara have been working with children across different range of settings, including early intervention with the Department of Education in Australia. She's been working in hospital, in home, in school, and in private practice. And now she runs her own practice called Cara Didio Speech Pathology. So Cara, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks for reaching out and asking me to be involved. I think it's a fabulous initiative.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's good to have you here. Thank you very much for taking the time. Now, we've got a lot of questions, and what we did is we picked 10. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the questions that we've received. I mean, it's crazy. We've received some questions from people from Greece as well. So it's really amazing to see how, people are really needing to talk to people like you guys and experts in the field. And now, before we get started, Cara, I wanted to, have a little segue in regards to, obviously COVID-19, and it has had a big impact on everyone's life, really. And I wanted to ask you, as a parent, but also as a professional, how did that impact you? And what are the challenges that you faced? And, how are you going now? Is it getting better or?
Yeah, so I guess like a lot of people, we're starting to see some return to normal life, but it's definitely been a challenge since March. I took over a lease of a new clinic space in early March, and there was umming and ahhing of, should I sign? What's going to happen? It wasn't really a reality here in Australia quite yet. But decided to take the plunge anyway, and then within 8 days we were all sort of in isolation, schools were closed. So the clinic was put on hold for a bit, and my practice become a telehealth only practice, working from home, and I have 3 children. Two are at school, one at preschool. So that was quite a juggle, as I think it was for many families. We were fortunate enough, though, that my husband and I could continue to work. I know there were many that weren't as fortunate, and there's been some big impacts in job loss. So we're very grateful for that, and a big thank you, I think, to all of my clients who gave it a go. It wasn't for everyone. I do work with a lot of special needs children who telehealth platform just wasn't appropriate for some of those families. So yeah, it was a challenge, but I think some good has come out of it. An opportunity for some continued telehealth. There's some families that have decided, hey, this is actually quite good for us, and they're continuing on with that. So, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, congratulations on being a mom and managing all of this. That's really impressive. Well done.
Yeah. No, well, we didn't really have any other choice, though, did we?
Yeah, that's true. Cool. So, all right. So we'll get started, Cara, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've so what we did is we just went out to the community and said, hey, we're gonna interview a certified speech pathologist. Make sure you submit your question, and then we will ask you those questions. So I'm gonna get started right now. The first question that we've received is, does dyslexia help with learning a new language?
Learning a new language. Well, I am not 100% sure. I don't know the research into that. I'm not actually sure if it's been well researched. But what I would be saying was that it would be quite challenging, because you are needing to learn another whole language system. There are some phonemes in other countries that we don't necessarily have in English, in other languages. So things even like thinking German, a PF, PF. We don't have that grapheme combination here in English. So I imagine that there would be just as many challenges trying to learn another language.
Yeah, and it's a good point that you've made. It's like it's not probably not well researched, so it could be a good question for the science out there to look at it. It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some languages that correlate with each other a little better. I think English can be quite a tricky language to learn. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm from France, and it's true that I don't speak Spanish, but there's a very large amount of word that are sort of kind of the same that I can't pick up straight up without knowing any Spanish. So yeah, in that sense, I don't know.
Yeah. So I think it would be challenging. I don't think being dyslexic would help. I think, was that the question you were asking? What impact that would have? Yeah, I think it would make it more challenging.
Okay. All right. So the second question that we received. So I'm assuming that one is from a parent, that's for sure. And so the question is, so I realized each child is different, but by the age of 2, how many words ideally should they have? So I'm assuming that should they have mean should they be aware of, or in that sort of sense?
Should they be using by 2? So spoken language by 2. We're saying around 50 spoken words at the age of 2. Generally, kids will understand a lot more than they're able to speak. So our receptive language, our understanding of language is developed before our spoken language comes. So 50 words is about the ballpark. And we're starting to see it to some words coming together into short phrases. So combining things might be simple sentences like daddy go, mummy car, those sort of things, just really short, simple utterances. There are some good developmental milestones available on the Raising Children network website. That's quite a good one it has communication, but development as a whole has it broken down into different ages. That's a good one to have a look at. And Speech Pathology Australia too have some great communication norms on there for ages, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, etc. So
Right, cool, awesome. I'll make sure to put all those reference at the end to everyone so that they can check them out. Yeah,
great. I'm happy to send them through to you.
Cool. All right, so the other question that we had is, does having a speech delay show an early sign for being dyslexic?
It doesn't mean you will go on to have dyslexia, but I think those that do have a diagnosis of dyslexia, that background history, often there is a history of having delayed speech and language development. Might be later to talk, perhaps mixing up sounds in words, saying things like aminal instead of animal, learning the names of words. So there is often a history of delayed speech and language, but it definitely doesn't mean because you have delayed speech and language you're going to go on to then have a dyslexic diagnosis.
And for, what is speech delay? Is it
So we talk about speech and language. So speech is more around the actual sounds in words, so being able to pronounce things correctly. And children will go through developmental patterns that are typical. So lots of children will say things like wabbit instead of rabbit. And there are norms for up until what age that's okay, or leaving the sounds off the end of words. So little children before 3 might leave the last sound off words, things like calling a hat, and dropping that final sound. Those sort of things are typical. But when they continue on past those expected timeframes, then that's a speech delay. But we also have a language delay where we're late to talk, late to put words together into sentences, smaller vocabulary, grammar, all those other parts. So speech and language are very separate. But I think in the speech pathology world, it's well understood by us, but everyone sees a speech pathologist often as just working with speech and that language side of it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and it's true that it could be. I mean, for me, you know, those concepts were very abstract.
Yeah,
it's not obvious what they are.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think going back to the question too around having a delay and then going on to receive a diagnosis of dyslexia, something we do know is that children with a speech and or language delay are more likely than their peers to have literacy difficulties. Whether it will end up being a diagnosis of dyslexia or dyslexia concerns, because you can appreciate if you're trying to sound out a word but you can't pronounce it correctly, you're trying to sound it out to write it, that's terribly hard. If you're in the classroom and you're pronouncing cat as tat, and then the teacher's writing on the board a k at the start, but you're saying a t, that phonemic development can be impacted, which is what we need for literacy.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. And so the other one that we received is from someone called Nick, and it's an interesting one. And so Nick is asking, is there any way when I'm reading to understand better what I'm reading?
Okay. Now, bear with me because my working history is mainly in paediatrics. So some of the suggestions I make may not be always appropriate for adults. And I know that even from a discussion you and I have had, Hugo, in the past, that it's very much an individual basis of strategies that might work for one person are not suitable for someone else. Things like printing things onto coloured paper can help, changing the screen background if you're reading something on a device or a computer or your phone. Keeping place on the page, so even using a piece of paper to sort of keep your spot on the page, or a ruler as you're going down, can help. And then there are a number of technology, text to speech, sort of different programs that you could use to help, audiobooks, so that the information can be read aloud to you. That might help some people to process the information better if they're hearing it rather than having to read it. What else? I'm not sure. Can you draw on any personal experience there, Hugo, of things that can help?
Yeah, well, it's what you've mentioned is interesting because it looks like there's a mix of technology and physical object, like, you know, the color paper, the color background, text to speech. Yeah, I mean, I don't personally read, but I, you know, obviously, you know, day-to-day life we have to write. And so I use something called, so I do a lot of spelling mistake, and I use what's called Grammarly, which is like, you know, it's a very cool add-on that you can add on your browser, and it will correct your text.
Yes.
And the other thing that I do use is text to speech. And what's really good is, like, for people who use Mac or, you know, any Apple device. I'm not sure for Windows, but you can select any text. and right click on it, and there's this option called speech or
Mm.
speak, I think, and it
Mhm.
will read the text aloud to you. So
Yeah.
that could be useful as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's less effortful too if you can listen. It's easier to listen to something again a second time to help that comprehension and processing than it would be to read it again if that's very effortful. And I think also talking about things to help, obviously seeking out that professional support, whether that's through tutoring. There are some programs that I think are run by volunteers even to offer tutoring for literacy support for adults. I can find out the name. It's not coming to me at the moment, but I can find out to share that with you, because if those earlier skills of being able to decode words, break it down, if they're not there, then it becomes really effortful to be reading a longer paragraph. You're putting all your energy into working out the individual words, that by the time you get to the bottom of it, it's very hard to comprehend what you've actually read when all the effort's put into those individual words.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Oh, that's
So,
some useful tips and tricks, I think, and I'm pretty sure people can test different methods and they'll find what works best for them, and yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
there's the Australia Dyslexia Foundation.
Okay.
They have a website, as well as the DSF, which is the Dyslexia Spelled Foundation. They have a lot of great resources, and it might be on that website that they mention about the volunteer tutoring program too for adult literacy difficulties.
There is we also at Dystech we also work very closely with a non-for-profit called Dyslexic, and their main priority is to help adults with dyslexia, which is kind of cool because you talk a lot about children and how do we help children with dyslexia, but not many people talk about adults. So I found this really cool.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, because you're right, we do tend to focus on children because they are in those education settings where literacy concerns are quite obvious. But if those individuals may be missed, or then they're going off into adulthood and those supports aren't as great, and I think it's fabulous if there's some things there. So that's dyslexic, is it?
Dyslexic, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the other question that we've received is also from someone who gives us their name, and that's from Chris. And so the question from Chris is there testing to confirm dysgraphia, and with whom can this be assessed?
Occupational therapists assess and provide intervention for dysgraphia, is my understanding. It's not a Speechy role that I'm aware of. And also psychologists or neuropsychologists, but I think it's the occupational therapist that will be providing more of the intervention side of it. Yeah.
Now, I know it's not really your role, but for people who don't know, can you give us a high-level details of what is dysgraphia?
So dysgraphia is more the difficulty with the writing of the letters. So the dyslexia sort of side of it, the sound and the spelling side would be knowing that the B makes the B sound, but the dysgraphic side would be the actual formation of the letter B. That's my understanding, and I'm definitely not an expert. That would be an occupational therapist that would be able to go into that in far more detail than I can, or the psychologist. Yeah.
Okay, great. The other one is an interesting one, which is kind of coming back to the technology a little bit about what we've talked about before, and so is what dyslexia app would you use for kids going into high school? And then after that, that person asked speech to text and text to speech, which is what we've discussed. But is there any app that you would recommend, like, parents to be using for their kid to, like, maybe get some support or feel more comfortable at school?
Yeah, I think in high school, kids like to not look too different from their peers as well. So where you can be trying to use apps on mainstream devices, like on an iPad or iPhones, I know that in the notes section that you can do speech to text in that, and then you can click email and send it off. So they're in those they're already built into those devices, and that's quite easy. Or you mentioned earlier Grammarly as well, which can be used. And then there's some other more specific apps. There's one, Dragon Anywhere. Not sure. Have you heard of that one?
I haven't. I'm going to take note of that. Actually, I need to look it up. So it's Drag and Anywhere?
Dragon, like the dragon, dragon. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's Claro PDF, which I don't have any personal experience with, but why I'm mentioning that one is it's because it has the ability to read text within a PDF document. So sometimes PDFs, I think, in text to speech apps are picked up more as an image, so the text doesn't get picked up. So Claro PDF, you can be reading text within a PDF. The Co-Writer app has predictive text, which can be helpful for that age group as well. And there's another one that I use with younger children, but it might be appropriate for early high school, which is called ClickerDocs. And why I like that one is ClickerDocs also has predictive text, but you have the ability to select a subject. So there are subjects like science or history, or it might be a topic like ancient Egypt or something. So if that's what's happening in the classroom, you can go into the app and select that subject so that your predictive text is more likely to come up with words associated with that topic.
That's really cool. That sounds like intelligence behind the app.
yeah, and it then does text to speech as well, so you can listen back to what the text has said to check in, and you also have the ability to email straight from that app as well. So a student might be able to complete their work and then just hit email to send it off to the teacher.
Awesome. That's a lot of app that you're giving us here. That's pretty cool. I think I mean there's so many app and technology has become such a good ally to everything that's about writing and reading, I think. And I think it's going to get better and better, I think.
Yeah, I think as we move towards, I mentioned, individuals not wanting to look different from peers. I think in the school setting now, there's a lot more use of technology. There's another one that's not an app is the C Pen as well.
Yep.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
I can't comment on how accurate it is, but it's my understanding of it is that you can use it over printed text to read aloud the text. So I guess it's a good one when you're not reading something on a screen, if you've got printed text on paper, that's the C Pen.
So I'll make sure to list all of that after.
Yeah, and there's more on the Homeschooling with Dyslexia website as well. They list a lot. I think it's, again, finding what suits your individual needs. Yeah.
Okay, so the other question is from an anonymous person, and actually I'm going to learn a lot also. I know a little bit about it, but I'm sure you'll be able to shed more light. And so the question is, what are phonic books, and should I use them for my kid? Okay,
phonics books. I love phonics books. Speech pathologists working with young children with literacy are big on promoting phonics books. Decodable readers is also another term that you might hear instead of phonics books. So I'm just having a quick look. So phonics is the ability the knowledge to sound out words. So knowing those sounds, knowing what sounds those letters make. That's phonics. That's the knowledge of phonics. So in phonics books, the words within those books are all words that can be sounded out, with the exception sometimes of those words that are often referred to as sight words. So they're sort of those words that don't follow the rules.
Right.
They might have the funny spelling that don't follow the phonics rules. So, and the readers are leveled. So you'd be starting at level 1, and often the sounds in a level 1 decodable reader book will be s, a, t, p, it, and n. So you've got 6 sounds, and then all the words in that phonics books are made up purely just with those 6 words. So they'll be really simple, short books to start with.
Okay.
They might have words like Matt and Tim. Tim sat on the mat. Those sort of really easy words. So they can all be sounded out. That's what phonics books are.
So would you
clear? I'm not sure if I've made that clear.
Yeah, I think it is. Well, I can try and explain what you said, and you tell me if I'm wrong. So,
yeah.
If I understand properly, you phonics books you have some sort of level of difficulty, and within the word that are in those books, and they are all sort of the same. They all have the sort of same pronunciation throughout the whole book, so that the child can really practice on that specific pronunciation throughout the book.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then so you'd start at level 1, and you might have those 5 sounds, and then you'll have the next step up, which will include your original sounds plus adding in a few more. So then you'll have, and then by the time you get to level 20, you've gone through all those 44 phonemes within the English language. And you are now able to decode words with any of those sounds in them. So it's a very structured program.
Right. And on another note, I had a discussion with someone who was from the Spelled Association, and he was explaining to me a bit about those phonic book, and he also mentioned the fact that, and I'm not sure if that's related to phonic book, it could be something different, but he was also mentioning that the fact that when the child, if you have a book, it's also very useful to have the image of the word. So for example, let's say you have cat, the word cat, it's also good to have on the other page like an image of the actual cat. Is that actually also in the phonic book, or is this a different, is this even a thing?
Yeah, it is. But we do tend, there's sometimes it still happens too, which it's a bit of a pet hate in the speech pathology world, that kids are sometimes prompted to have a guess at the word based on what they can see on the page. And that is not something I encourage, because then that's when we'll get kids come in for intervention, and there'll be a pig on the page, but the sentence says something about the mud or something, and so they'll say, oh, the pig, and those sounds are not even in the word. So we're more encouraging, look at the sound, say the sound, and read the word.
So
but for children, there needs to be pictures to keep the book interesting.
Of course. Okay, that's a good point. And so would you recommend this for kids? Like, would you recommend parents to actually use those books?
Yeah, absolutely. And starting at those early levels, and then progressing through. Often schools, there's more and more schools now are doing it, following what we call synthetic phonics programs. So that really structured teaching of phonics, of this is a S, it makes a sound, and then there are readers that pair up with what they're...
Right. So it's the same system of level, from 1 to 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Spelled has Spelled actually has some free phonics books that you can download off their website, which are quite good.
Mm.
There's Sounds Right has phonics books. Little Learners Love Literacy. And then there's ones, the Moondog series have phonics books for older readers that are struggling.
Oh,
So
right.
sometimes those basic books that are pitched for typically developing children who are learning, they're very young. So the images and what the story's about really isn't appropriate for an older reader who's having trouble. But there are some good ones now, the Moondog series. There's more, I can't think of them, but they're pitched at older readers with that early phonics skills still
Oh,
in them.
that's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, we have another one, and so that's a I think that's a broad question. I'll give it a go. So, the question is, what is a good routine to have as a parent to teach my child how to read?
A good routine. Read every day, read from birth. Children are tuning into our language from the get-go as soon as they're born. So reading, setting up that routine, whether it's bath time, pajamas on, brush teeth, read a story every night, exposing kids to books. I like to personally leave books just around the house anywhere, so that the kids are more likely to just, I'm just sitting here next to it, I might pick it up and ask mum to read it. So we definitely don't have a tidy bookshelf in this house. There's lots of books left around everywhere. And kids model what their parents do. So if they see you reading, they're more likely. What else is good habits? Libraries, lots of local libraries have story time for preschoolers where you can go along once a week. They're free. The children will share a couple of stories, listen to a couple of stories, and then they might participate in a craft activity related to those stories. And then you have a chance to borrow the books, which is a good way to get some new books cycling through the house.
That's a really good. Tips and trick. I like the. I'm just leaving books all around so that the kids get around them and say, "Hey, let's check that out. That's a cool one."
Yeah, that's right. And obviously screen time. It's a big part of our lives, and we can't pretend that it's not there and it's the way of the future. But telly off, limiting screen time, and there are some great apps, great early literacy apps, but nothing takes place of a book and that shared reading time. You don't have to. A lot of families will say, they don't want to listen to the whole story. That's okay. You can even make up your own story. Look at the pictures for the little children, make up a story. They might have a favourite page and they want to stay on that page for 5 minutes and keep talking about it. That's fine. It doesn't have to be front to back, read every word. Yeah, just share those stories. You can see I'm very passionate about books and reading.
That's really cool. That's a great idea. It's like, if you, don't be too formal, like be open, and create your own story. If your kids want to stay on the page, just do it. That's good.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So the second last question that we've received is kind of a similar one the one that we've asked before, but it's a bit different. And so the question is, so who should I see to assess dyspraxia?
Dyspraxia. Okay. So there are some different definitions. You can have an oral and or verbal dyspraxia, which affects speech, or if it's an oral dyspraxia, it affects the motor coordination of the mouth. So dyspraxia is that motor in coordination, that motor planning. But a dyspraxia can affect the limbs, it can affect the whole body. So if you're looking at a dyspraxia away from the mouth, away from speech and oral, so speech and oral dyspraxia would be assessed by a speech pathologist. It's often referred to as apraxia. But for a motor dyspraxia, which is also can be referred to as a developmental coordination disorder, just to throw a lot of words out there. You could have an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, and or a psychologist involved. So the occupational therapist and the physiotherapist would be looking more at the gross motor skills and fine motor skills. You might have the psychologist on board to do some assessment of cognitive functioning to rule anything else out that might be causing the difficulties. And then for your oral and verbal dyspraxia, you would have a speech pathologist involved.
And so, there's a lot of person we can see and that people can see, but like, what would you like, as a parent, you have to start somewhere. Do you have any, like, I know it's not your, probably not, I mean, you probably have some expertise in the apraxia.
Yes, yeah.
But like, where, if a parent has some concern, like, where should they start? Should they go to their school and say, is there something wrong? Like, or
a good starting place is if it's a preschool child and you're still seeing the maternal and child health nurse, they're a great resource for recommending where to go on to, and a GP as well. Sometimes the GP might not be too sure and they might recommend a couple of places to go. But generally, or the GP may also refer on to a paediatrician. But I guess if it's something to do with the mouth and the talking, then you're pretty safe with a speech pathologist.
Okay.
And if the family's disclosing that there's other motor difficulties to refer on as well. But your GP or your maternal and child health nurse is a great place to start.
All right. Great. So now I think I've kept my preferred question last. So that's the last question, and I really like that question because that's real. That's real question. And so it's the question from. it's the question is, what can I do? And that's anonymous. We don't know who asked us that question, but it's a great question. So it's, what can I do as a boyfriend to help my girlfriend with her dyslexia?
Oh, it's just actually cut out a little bit, Hugo.
Yeah,
can you please repeat the question?
Yes, I will.
Sorry.
I will. No, that's okay. So the question is, what can I do as a boyfriend to help my girlfriend with her dyslexia? How cute is this?
Well, I think the fact that somebody's already asking this question shows that they're quite supportive. So that's the first thing that jumps to mind, is to be supportive. And I don't know this person or their circumstances or their age. So I'll just throw a few different suggestions out there, but I think being upfront and asking your partner, what would you like me to do? What can be helpful? Because that's very personal, I imagine, to each person. Of, do they want to be corrected every time that they're making an error, or is that frustrating? Would they rather just sometimes be corrected? So really having that open communication with each other. What would you like from me? If they are seeking any intervention, any support, any tutoring, ask about it, get involved, so that you can be learning with them the strategies that are working for them. For, I guess, if you're a student that's studying, or if you are in a workplace, if is written content or things that you're needing to type or to write, perhaps offering to proofread that stuff for them, give some feedback. What else? Asking, I don't know, everyone, and depending on the age, everyone texts and sends emails. Maybe that's not suitable. Maybe your girlfriend would prefer a phone call rather than lots of texts back and forth. What else? If you're living together, the girlfriend with dyslexia, organisation and planning skills may not be a strength. So being lenient and understanding that if they're forgetting things, not running on time, that can be part of it. I guess getting a good understanding of the diagnosis and what can be involved. I think that lots of people, oh yeah, dyslexia, they have trouble reading and spelling. But there are other things that come with it, that organisation, that planning, those other things that for someone that doesn't understand could be quite frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's also on the other side. I mean, whether it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it's kind of the same. I mean, I can relate. I have terrible organization skill. So 100%, you know, if we've got stuff, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe putting some things in place. So sending those reminders like, hey, remember, you need to do this today. But I think chatting about that and making sure you're on the same page so that your partner does want that. If they don't want you to be reminding them all the time, then that's not going to be something that's helpful. But if it is something that they're like, yeah, actually that would be really great if you could just send me a reminder of, you know, yep, don't forget that after work tonight you have to do that. Or
yeah. So I guess from what I get from all those tips and tricks and advice is really communication is really important, and telling things to each other is kind of, you know, the way to move forwards and go through that.
Yeah, I think so. Communication and understanding of yeah.
Look, that's 10 question. That's 10 question. Thank you so much, Cara. Now, before we put an end to the first episode, so tell us a little bit about your business. Where can people find you? How can people reach out to you? Tell us a bit more about your business here.
Well, it's not a very creative name, Cara de Dio Speech Pathology, but I mean, and there is a website where you can find out some more information.
You've cut off. Can you just repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. So I'm in Terrelgan. I'm not sure how much you heard me say. So I'm in Terrelgan. There is a website, www.caradadiospeechpathology.com. There's a bit of information on there. There's a referral form, new client case history form that can be filled out. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is a bit of a waiting list, which is across Valley. So if there are any brilliant speech pathologists out there listening to this and you're looking for a change, do get in touch. And we work with just children, so from birth up to around 18 years.
Okay.
Is what my service is about.
I'll make sure to put everything, all those links to the people out there so that they can reach out. Cara, I want to say thank you so much. That was a very good use of your time, I think, and for everyone, that people can actually get a bit of your expertise out there. I know that there is, you know, plenty of people who need more people like you, who are, you know, working for children and supporting them. So I want to thank you so much for being here. That's the first episode of Ask a Speechy. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you for having me. And I'm always happy to answer any questions via email as well. So if anyone does have any more questions and they want to send them through, I'm always happy. I'll share my email and you can pop that up as well, Hugo. Thank you. Thanks for having me and for this opportunity to answer some of the questions that are out there. There was quite a good mix of questions, so it's good.
Yeah. Thank you, Gara.
No problem. Thanks, Hugo. See you later.